Good evening, class. I'm attorney Alfonso Roma. Once again, I'm your instructor in Criminal Law Book 1, the Revised Penal Code. And tonight we'll be discussing alternative circumstances. Now, if you were remember, we already discussed justifying, exempting, mitigating, aggravating circumstances, those circumstances which may affect the imposition of penalties. In case of justifying and exempting circumstance, total justifying and exempting circumstances, the persons who committed the crime is justified or exempted. In case of mitigating circumstance, the penalty to be imposed upon conviction will be lowered, and in case of presence of aggravating circumstances, the penalty to be imposed upon conviction will be at the maximum period of the law. So, now we will proceed with alternative circumstances. Alternative circumstance under Article 15 of the Revised Penal Code speaks about the existence of circumstance which may be considered as mitigating or aggravating, and we will discuss that later on. Say, for example, relationship, intoxication, degree of instruction, and education of the offender. Those are conditions attending the commission of the crime. So, relationship, it may be mitigating, it may be aggravating. Intoxication may be aggravating or mitigating, depends upon the circumstances. So that's why we will discuss that here. There's no specific circumstances or conditions set forth under alternative. It's just laid out the rules, whether or not aggravating or mitigating circumstances may be appreciated in when present in committing the crime. So we'll look at it as alternative circumstances, and we will deal with it to this in this lecture. Now, Article 15 of the Revised Penal Code provides three alternative circumstances. As I've said before, relationship, intoxication, and instruction or degree of education. Now, alternative circumstances with respect to relationship. Now, uh, generally, relationship is mitigating in crimes against property. So, kung imo mga parente nangawat nimo, that's ascendants, descendants, then relationship may be considered as mitigating circumstances. Now, you will later on find out that there are crimes where uh, relationship is absolutory cause, meaning kung parente ka, then commit ka nga krimen against sa imong parente, then you may not be liable because the law states so. So what are those? We're going to discuss absolutory cause first. Now, in the case of theft, estafa, or malicious mischief, wherein the victim is the spouse, ascendant, descendant, widow, brother or sister, or relative by affinity in same degree of the accused. So, if ang kaso is theft, estafa, malicious mischief, then it's an absolutory cause under Article 332 of the Revised Penal Code Book 2. Now, Article 332 of Book 2 of the Revised Penal Code speaks about persons exempt from criminal liability. That's absolutely cause. The law provides exemptions for certain persons, which is exempt from criminal liability. As I've mentioned, estafa, theft, or malicious mischief committed against the spouse, kung ilalo ni mo imuhang Mrs. or Mr., which is tantamount or equivalent to estafa, you may not be liable if kawato nimo yung kwarta sa imuhang igsuon. You may not be liable or gubon nimo ang isa ka butang property sa imong igsuon, that is malicious mischief. You may not be liable because the law states so. Again, estafa, theft, or malicious mischief against spouse, ascendants, descendants, brothers, sisters, or relatives by affinity of same degree. Brother-in-law, father-in-law, mother-in-law. That's affinity by same degree. So that's it. The absolutory cause, as I have mentioned, which is exempt certain persons from criminal liability. But civil liability is not included. So, exempt ka sa criminal liability which includes imprisonment, exempt ka na. But then, you may be still liable civilly. Kung unsay danyos nga nabuhat nimo against sa imong spouse, ascendants, descendants, brothers, sisters, all relatives by same affinity, then you will pay for it. It doesn't mean that you are criminally exempt from criminal liability, carries with it, or does not necessarily mean that you are also exempt from civil liability. That's absolutely cause under Article 332 of the Revised Penal Code. Now, moving on, relationship, yes, in case of property or in cases of crimes against property, relationship is generally mitigating. In case of crimes against person, the if the crime is committed is grave felony, then it's always aggravating circumstances when it's crime against person. Well, the crime committed is grave felony. So, kung grabe or grave felony, which we will discuss later, and grave felony carries with it with penalty of. So, again, if the crime committed is against person and it is grave felony, the grave felony we discuss it, or we may have been discussed it. Grave felonies which the law attaches the capital punishment or penalties which are afflictive, meaning the afflictive penalties as provided for under Article 25 of the Revised Penal Code, that is reclusion perpetua, that's 20 to 40 years, reclusion temporal, which is 12 to 20 years, and prison mayor, which is 6 to 12 years. That's afflictive penalties. That's grave penalties. So, going back to the alternative circumstance, if the crime committed of relative is carries with it grave penalties or it's a grave felony, then the relationship is always considered as aggravating. If the crime committed is light or less grave felony, and the victim is lower in degree, kanang descendant, anak, apo, and crime committed against person is less grave, then it's mitigating. If the the victim is of higher degree, kanang gulang, pero ang gi-commit is less grave felony like physical injuries, light physical injuries, nya gulang ang gidapatan sa anak, ang anak ning dapat sa amahan or sa apuhan, then that's considered as aggravating circumstance. Kung ang descendant or ang amahan or ang apuhan ning dapat sa apo or sa anak, then that may be considered as mitigating. Pero kung pataas ang bata ning dapat sa iyang apuhan or amahan, then it's considered as uh, aggravating. Mitigating tong paubos. So, that's it. In crimes against property, always mitigating. And remember the absolutely cause that I have mentioned a while ago. Intoxication. If dili na siya habitual and then dili subsequent to the commission of the crime, then it may be considered as mitigating. Otherwise, it will be considered as aggravating. So, kung dili ka pala hubog, ning commit ka og crime, then hubog ka ato nga time, it may be considered as mitigating. Pero kung pala hubog ka, ning commit ka og crime, then it may be considered as aggravating. Then nagplano ka, nag-inom, then commit a crime, that will also be considered as aggravating. So, mo na siya ang time nga kanang nagplano ka ang buhaton ng krimen o niya nag-inom ka para to solidify your resolve in committing the crime, then it will be considered as aggravating. Pero kung ang pagbuhat sa krimen is bunga lang sa kahubog nimo, which is naturally mawala ka sa imuhang kung sobra ang kahubog nimo, then mawala ka sa imuhang usual normal self, then it may be considered as mitigating. Degree of instruction or education, kanang test anang degree of instruction or mitigating education does not refer only to the literacy of the accused but the level of his intelligence. So wala na nagpasabot nga college graduate dapat or doctoral graduate or criminology graduate. It's the level of intelligence. So ang kana siya kung gamiton against property, then it may be considered as aggravating. Ay mong gigamit imuhang pagkamaayo sa math or sa science or sa any field to commit a crime. Possible in case of estafa or theft, then may be considered as aggravating. Now, ang degree of instruction or education cannot be now again degree of instruction or education may be committed or may be considered as aggravating in crimes against property and crimes against chastity, kanang rape or kanang by deceit na nailad nimo ang babae, then that's may be considered as aggravating. Then kanang against property, if kanang for example, the level of literacy sa akusado is low o wala gyud sa ineskwelahan, niya nangawat siya tungod kay gigutom siya or something as necessarily he needs to eat, then he may be considered as, or the degree of instruction may be considered as mitigating. So depende na sa apply and appreciate the circumstance. We will continue next time. Bye.